So Uranus has just gone direct, and it is slow. It actually went direct on the 3rd of February, and it's now just eking. It's like a steam engine. It's going very slowly up to speed. So, and this, of course, happens all the time. All the planets go retrograde and direct throughout the year, except for the sun and the moon. Now, I shouldn't say throughout the year, because Mercury goes retrograde 3 times, and of course, Venus only does it every couple of years, and the same thing with Mars. But the outer planets, when I say outer, I mean from Jupiter out, they all go retrograde at least once a year, and they stay retrograde for a period of time. So Uranus right now is just now eking back up. Like, again, it's like a train. They slowly come up to speed, right? So Uranus went direct on the 3rd. It's only doing about 2 minutes per day, and then every day it's going to get a little bit faster. Same thing with Saturn. It just went direct a while back, and it's picking up speed. So these have a huge impact on planet Earth. I mean, we can really feel this, and especially if any of you have transits that are activated in your chart, you're really going to feel it. Like, for instance, if somebody has Uranus, squaring Mars, conjuncting Mars, and it's stationing right over it and it's getting going, boy, you're really going to feel that. Well, the world is likely to feel it now, too. I mean, look what we've got going on. Still got the Russia-Ukraine thing. We still have Iran bubbling over there. We've got this armada parked around Iran. Look at what we've got going on in the United States. Dissension. We've got half the country wants to remove the illegal aliens. The other half wants to keep them, right? So all this polarization with ICE. And again, Uranus will stir the pots like a big canoe paddle. Uranus, to me, if you look at its glyph, it's 2 crescents of the moon bent outwards with the cross in the middle over the sun. All the planetary glyphs come from combinations of the circle, which is the sun and the seed, the crucible, which is the moon, and the cross, which is where spirit manifests. So, in fact, Uranus will actually increase up until it gets to about 3.5 degrees of travel per day. So astrologers and astronomers always measure travel in degrees and minutes. And of course, there's 60 minutes per degree. So it's a little heady, but once you get used to it, it's pretty simple. But it's a way of measuring speed, just like we measure miles per hour and kilometers per hour, right? So Uranus is just beginning to eke into, moving direct. And give it a month or so, and it's going to be much, much faster. Well, it's moving towards the fixed star 𝐿𝐶𝐽. And there's going to be a lot of transits too. Like, for instance, on Mercury will square Uranus tomorrow. So you're always going to get inner planets and the moon making aspects to it because Uranus is an outer planet. But here's the big picture, and this is what I want to focus on. The dissension in the world is what it tends to bring up. And when the mic was muted before, I mentioned that the last time Uranus went through the Pleiades, we had World War II. Before that, it was the Civil War. Before that, it was the Revolutionary War. And if we keep leapfrogging back about every 84 to 86 years, even though Uranus wasn't discovered, there was all kinds of dissension that would couple or parallel when Uranus went through the Pleiades. So this is a powerful time right now. Now, the other one that I've been mentioning, and a lot of people have given me comments about that, is Saturn and Neptune conjuncting. Now, Saturn and Neptune conjunct all the time. Somebody's mentioning here on the comments, in the 1882 Saturn and Neptune conjunction in Taurus marked the pivotal moment of global history, which included the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. You bet. And of course, that was, a lot of points in history can be tied to these major outer planets making conjunctions, squares, and oppositions. It's absolutely amazing when I go back and look at it. Like, for instance, COVID was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. 9/11 was a Saturn-Pluto opposition. We actually have found that Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions, which happen about every 20 years, are huge marker points in time. In fact, I was just watching Jay Leno this morning with his Stanley steamer car. And steam was actually invented in the early 1700s on a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. It was actually called a Great Conjunction, which ushered in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Well, in 2020, not the beginning of it, but the latter part of it was actually on the winter solstice of 2020, we had a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which was also called a mutation conjunction, which happens about every 240 years. Well, what's interesting on that is we never heard everybody chirping AI before that. I mean, we did a little bit, but that's when, like the pelicans in Saving Nemo, everybody's AI, 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 right? So they're going off about AI. Well, what's interesting here is these conjunctions always bring marker points in changes of society. Well, the big one we got coming up, and today is what, the 4th? So it's just 16 days from now is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Now, here's what's cool. a lot of times, in fact, this is a good astronomy experiment. If people have a calendar, or if you've got an astrology program or you follow astrology, you'll notice every month the moon's going to make every single aspect to everything in the sky. So if you walk outside, like a lot of times people love moon-Venus conjunctions, right? Or moon-Venus trines. But the conjunctions are the ones that really show up the most powerful. So if you walk outside, a lot of times you'll see the moon, and right underneath it or above it, you'll see Venus, right? That's just one example, or Jupiter. And those are always the two good guys, right? So notice this diagram I'm going to put up here. If you hold up your hand like so, that looking up in the sky, and you extend your arm out about as far as it goes, and that's about a 25-degree distance. If you do your two fingers like this, which is, some people might recognize that one, 15 degrees, and of course your fist is about 10 degrees, 3 fingers put together is about 5 degrees, and of course 1 degree is the pinky. Well, why is that important? Because it allows you not to have any tools, and you can actually experiment how far apart in latitude are the planets. And see, that's something most astrologers don't talk about. A conjunction is what we call longitudinal conjunction. That just means they line up together vertically. You see, but if two planets are very far apart in latitude, now astrologers and astronomers and astrophysicists call those declination or ecliptical latitude. What does that mean? Well, the ecliptic is your apparent look out into the stars or the heavens from your latitude. That's called the ecliptic, or the apparent path of the Earth around the sun. So not to get all heady here, but it's kind of cool to understand these terms, because then when you get around people to talk about it, you know a little bit about it, right? And the cool thing is, if you get a conjunction where, let's say it's the moon and Venus, or let's go back to why I brought this up, Saturn and Neptune. Saturn and Neptune, you might have Saturn way up here and Neptune way down here. Now, the difference with Neptune is you're not going to see it unless you got a pretty good telescope, because Neptune is so far out there. And it's interesting, Saturn is the last visible planet that anybody can see. So, and it looks like a star in the sky. So, and if you got a telescope, you can actually see the rings and all this stuff. Well, nobody's going to see Neptune with the naked eye. But if you could, and you had a telescope, you would see how close in ecliptic latitude they are. Well, here's the thing, and all the ancients knew this in their dispositions on interrogation astrology, electional astrology, and aspects in your birth chart. See, if you have like a Saturn return, and Saturn's very high in ecliptical latitude, when it makes the Saturn return to your birth chart, it's not as strong. But when they're right together, it's really strong. You see, because not only are they lining up in the same degree or channel, if you will, but now you've got the directed rays. It's almost kind of like looking at a laser and seeing, do the two energies line up at one point? That's kind of the analogy. Well, here's the thing, because everybody's been asking me about, what do you think of this Neptune Saturn? Well, it's exceedingly powerful. Why? Because it's in less than a degree. From my calculations, it's going to be about 50-something minutes of arc. And just to give you an idea, 60 minutes is 1 degree. And again, if I go back to that, if you could see Neptune and you held up your finger, that's how close Saturn and Neptune are going to be. 1 degree is Popeye on spinach. It's really, 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 really strong. And see, that's what I found. Like a lot of people say, well, I had a Saturn return, it wasn't that bad. Other people say, oh my God, I had a Saturn return, I almost died. Some people do die on them. I mean, how many people have we seen in the past, they pass away at 57, 58, 59, you see, or other transits. I had a friend of mine pass away. He had a solar arc Saturn right over his ascendant, and the ecliptical latitude was really close. So this is a great secret to astrology. And a lot of astrologers don't look at it. They just look at where's the moon and, where everything, which is okay. But if you want to get accurate, you got to really microanalyze the astronomy, because that's really what astrology is, to your birth chart as well as the world. Well, the world's very likely to experience a very powerful energy. Now, people might say, well, what is that? Saturn always rules the structures of reality in our society. Neptune is the melting down of that. Neptune actually could suggest alternative realities. And a lot of people have been saying, Jeff, what do you think of 3i Atlas? It's mysterious how sometimes these asteroids and these bodies come through the solar system and nobody knows what they are. Everybody's conjecturing, what is 3i Atlas? They're measuring things on it that don't look like it's a regular asteroid. They may be right about that. I get that it is a little bit nefarious. Also, too, there's never one thing going on with astronomy and astrology. You have just a plethora of aspects and things happening in the sky. Remember, I said right after the 20th of this month, which is the exact position of Saturn and Neptune in the sky, and boy, they're close in ecliptic latitude, which increases the energy tenfold. probably more than that. It's exponentially stronger when two planets line up very close in latitude as well as in longitude. So that's a conjunction. And these are things that really have to be paid attention to. So this is going to be powerful. And I know at the top of the pyramid, we have many forces in this planet, and I'm not so sure some of them aren't demonic, as well as terrestrial and extraterrestrial, that influence the flow of life on this planet. And that may sound crazy to some folks, but take a look around and at the evidence. And I can tell you, this is likely to bring a major shift. A lot of people have been asking me. I was just on a show yesterday, the Supernatural Girls, and they were asking me, what do you think is going to happen with the finances, right? Well, I got to tell you, I took a look at that. I want to put that chart back up here for a minute here. I'm not going to put it on the screen, but I just want to look at it before I say too much. But that chart seems to show there is going to be some disruption. And again, we saw what happened with silver and gold, especially silver, dropped like 40% right when the new Fed chair was called, right? Or inaugurated or whatever they said. I think they just selected him. And I don't know if that's done yet or not. I haven't been following the news on that. But I do get there's going to be disruptions, but ultimately we may see new financial systems coming in. And this is an interesting thing. You know, I always get people both ways. Some people say, well, you know, you're always gassing Trump, or, you know, you're saying this about Trump. I don't want to get into politics, even though it's hard not to talk about them. But I really think we're going to see a major shift in the structures of finances. Whether you like Trump or dislike Trump, my astrological opinion is what he's doing, bringing in all of the changes with manufacturing, you know, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, I think is a good thing. I really do. I think the country is so far in debt that, I mean, we're north of $38 trillion of debt. And whether you like anybody or dislike anybody, that is a fact. And, you know, I always bring this up. If you're 40 years old, you're just a bit over 1 billion seconds old. And this is a numbers game here that I'm talking about. So when you look at numbers, you know, if you're 80 years old, you're just a little over 2 billion seconds old. And you can do the math and figure it out, 60 seconds per minute and all that. So you just multiply it out. Well, I actually said, how long is 1 trillion seconds? You know, just to kind of get my head around $1 trillion, right? 1 trillion seconds is 11,700 years. It's actually a little more than that. 760 something odd years. You can do the math. I can't remember to the decimal point. But that just gives you a concept of what $1 trillion is. You know, that's the United States military budget. So when we look at 38 plus trillion, and that's only what they tell us. We don't even know what's going on with the Black Ops, let alone the Western financial system of what's happening, you know, in Europe and Australia and many of these other westernized countries, South America, Australia, etc. It's huge. It's absolutely colossal, the amount of money that is flowing through the coffers and the bond markets, etc. So what I get here, if the astrology that I'm reading is right, because I always put that caveat in there. Astrology, you got to really be careful when you read certain interrogations, because the interpretation has to be determined right. Well, I get that overall we're heading into a new direction. And again, a lot of people are speculating on crypto. Gold-backed currency is a very strong possibility. I know the central banks have been buying up gold and silver like crazy. And you know, anybody who's been following the silver market, it hit $110 approximately an ounce just a few days ago, and it's probably going to go much higher than that, in my opinion. You know, I'm not here telling people to buy silver, but I think it's a good thing to maybe look at. You know, it's no question about that. So here's the point. I think this Saturn-Neptune is going to be a trigger that's going to change a lot of the directions of where we're at in society. And if you couple that with Uranus, which is also going across the Pleiades, this is a cocktail that's unlike any other time in history. And they're all unique. When you look at this, every single, you know, configuration throughout history is never the same. Even 9/11, when you look at the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, or I should say opposition, and you look at COVID, there's never, ever, these events show up, but they never show up the exact same way. I would expect some very underhanded stuff that we may not even know about with this Neptune, again, Saturn conjunction. So it's very, very powerful. And I have to tell you, I know people, clients who I've been talking to who have Saturn and Neptune crossing their ascendant. I've heard everything from mass confusion to complete, you know, loss of strength in their bodies. I know other people who've got it trining and sextiling and making good aspects in their chart, and it has been very positive. And see, this is the interesting thing, because a lot of people are out there saying, well, it's going to be love and light. Everyone's going to expand and everything will be wonderful. Well, for some people, it will be that way. And other people, it could be really dramatic, depending on what it is. Like if you've got Saturn and Neptune conjuncting your Mars, squaring your Mars, opposing your Mars, you're probably going to find it's going to be a challenging time. However, what's cool about astrology is if you study it, you find out, when does that happen? When does it leave? You see, because Saturn and Neptune are coming together at a very powerful conjunction point, both by latitude and longitude. So it's very, very powerful. And depending on where it is in your chart, your houses and the aspects it's making, it's going to be totally different for every single human being. I think collectively, for the mass consciousness of people, it's going to dissolve a lot of the reality structures that many people have, and new ones are going to be brought in. And that's kind of what Neptune does. Neptune is a really elusive planet. If you study its glyph, it's the crescent of the moon over the cross. It's like bringing down psychic, intuitive energies that now concretize into your reality of time and space. That's what the cross means. See, the cross comes from sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight. And very powerful. So it's where spirit manifests. We come out between mom's legs and they cut the umbilical cord. We are now in time and space. And that is the earth. And every day of our lives, we're going to experience sunrise, noon, sunset, midnight until we exit these garments known as bodies. So it's very, very powerful stuff. I'm going to take a look here at a couple of the comments here. So, yeah, somebody was mentioning Dr. Robin 𝐬𝐿 was a guest on Quite Frankly. I'm actually going to be on Quite Frankly later today. And I like him a lot. He's a lot of fun. So I've been invited to be on his show again, which I like a lot. I was with Sam Tripoli not too long ago, too, on Tinfoil Hat. We really had a good time on that one. So, but I can tell you that the reality structures are going to dissolve in many different ways. I think on the political side, or the, you could say reality side. I mean, look at the Epstein files. I mean, some of the stuff that I've heard and read in that, I haven't spent a lot of time on it, but wow. I mean, this is what I've always been saying. This is a dimension of good and evil. And when you hear about some of the stuff that some of these people have done, I mean, you have to be demonic to get into the kind of stuff that I've read about. The cannibalism, the sacrificial stuff, the sex trafficking, I mean, it's some pretty dark stuff, and very disturbing to our reality structures. On the other side, I'm talking to people who are really expanding in consciousness and knowledge. And that's the more positive side. We really want to stay there for sure. And, this is a great time for people to question their beliefs, to, really look at the dogma that, we may or may not have been exposed to throughout our lives, and say, how do I really react to my world? And all causation is mental. I always talk about the third eye chakra. The third eye chakra is where we emit thought form elementals. If anybody ever wants to read about that, this is one of my favorite books. I bring it up all the time. The Magus of Strovolos has an entire chapter dedicated to the thought form elementals. Well, people may say, well, what is that? Well, Dr. Emoto proved that thoughts are literally things. If anybody's familiar with him, if you're not, you should get familiar. It's really interesting. He took petri dishes of water and had people meditate or pray, or he would sample water and freeze it, put it under a microscope, and he would find that positive sacred thoughts or generative thoughts always came out looking like sacred geometry. Worry, fear, anger, discord always came out looking like gobbledygook. Well, isn't that interesting? We are thought form elemental generation machines. In fact, you can feel it. Every person we meet, don't you notice, when you get around them, you can say, well, that person makes me feel good. That person disturbs me, right? So we're all putting out energy into our field. It's absolutely amazing how much energy a human being generates. It's pretty amazing stuff. I mean, we're all at 98.6 or somewhere close to that, right? And of course, we get that all from our food, but it's amazing the amount of energy a human being generates from birth to death. Absolutely phenomenal when you think about it. And it all comes out of the food and the etheric energy we take in from the universe. So when we pay attention to our mind, which is one of the most important things in the universe, because that's the only thing we come in here with, even though it's blocked at birth, we leave here with a consciousness that we've developed. And it's always good to question that. That's one of the positive things I would really say, no matter what the world does, no matter how crazy the news gets, is focus on our reaction to things. See, Saturn and Neptune is a powerful time of re-examining your reality and your reaction to the reality structures in your life. In some ways, Saturn and Neptune might be worth $100,000 worth of psychotherapy. And, you know, I always say these challenging aspects often have more good to them than's ever fully understood. So it's something to be, you know, aware of. And again, every single person will have this aspect, their chart, in different ways. You know, the house it's in, the aspects it makes to your ascendant and to the other planets in your chart, even midpoints, very powerful. And in Vedic astrology, we're all in these time lords called doshas. We're all running a certain frequency or channel, if you will, if you want to use that analogy, that is grasping our aura, which gets into karma. You know, I always say the earth is a grounding rod. It's literally a place where spirit grounds out things that are attached to the soul roots, and very deep stuff. And that is the whole premise behind Vedic and Naadi astrology. It's looking at time and space and the dissipation of energies through us. We are like a wire grounding out into our physical reality. And the real arbiter, or if you will, the factor that really controls how that plays out is our free will. It's our reaction to things. And we see this every day on the news. Some people react very positively. Other people can get pretty nuts. And it's up to us in the final analysis to use this incredible mind we all have and react in a way that's more appropriate. And that's I think, the value of looking at astronomy and astrology. And again, I always mention this book too. This is a book known as Esoteric Practices. This was also written by the Magus of Strovolos. And what he talks about there is visualization techniques and meditation techniques that actually teach you how to focus the mind and reconstruct elementals. It's like working out. You know, if you lift weights a lot, you're going to get, you know, pretty beefed up, right? It's the same thing with the mind. These are mind exercises that train you how to dissipate karmic issues, also psychological blockages that you might have. And wherever we put our mind is where we put our manifestation. All causation is mental. That's been mentioned in many great teachings. And, you know, when I look at astrology, I always say, well, okay, what can I do to react less to that, or in a more positive, constructive way? You know, I'll never forget, years ago, I had a Saturn-Mars conjunction. Everybody will experience that at least probably 2 or 3 times in a lifetime, because it takes 29 and a half years approximately for Saturn to go around your birth chart. And I saw that one coming at me, and I thought, wow, that, you know, you read all the descriptions of Saturn and Mars, right? I thought, well, this is going to be tough, right? And then I thought, well, wait a minute. You know, this is also a great time to get heavy duty and challenging stuff done. And that's exactly what I did. I actually did a welding project and built this whole apparatus that I wanted to build, which was really productive. And I took an energy that was supposedly negative by a lot of astrologers and actually turned it into a great positive. And the way to turn, I think, this Saturn-Neptune into a positive is, remember, Neptune is the portal to the subconscious mind. Here, I'm going to share the screen as I always do. You got to bear with me for a minute as I do that. But you'll see here, this diagram, which I put up many, 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 many times, is this one right here. Again, psychology likes to tell us we have a conscious mind, which is this reality down here, and a so-called subconscious mind up here, right? Well, the other diagram that is a kind of a parallel to this is this one right here. And you could actually divide the subconscious mind into 2 more divisions. And you can see here, not only do we still have the thick dashed line, which is kind of the division between the so-called subconscious mind or upper portions of the soul, this down here, this little area here between this lower dash line is the rational, logical, you could say, elements of the spiritual part of the mind. And this down here is the emotional part of the mind, which is the one that all of us tend to default to. This is, again, why I say AI ain't never going to be like you and I. And that is going to be a theme that is going to be so, so important. See, I always say Vedic astrologers pay great attention to the traits of the mind by analyzing the moon. The moon is our emotional perception of reality. And you think about it, we turn on the news, or hopefully not, but when we look at the world, it's always bad news, always something new, right? Have you ever noticed most news stations, they don't have news anymore, they have alerts, right? Everything's an alert, everything's an emergency, right? Shock value. And the world will always be hammering on us emotionally, things that happen to us. We take logic and reason and we emotionalize it. It's just how we're wired. I know that's how I'm wired. I can tell you guys this stuff and I go do my stuff too. I'm human. We all are, right? We are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And the emotional portion of our psyche is always reacting. We have our parents, all the stuff that happened to us. Every human being has a story, right? And that story is different for all of us. It all comes down to what were we exposed to. Well, if you zoom this back out, notice way up above here, if I zoom out the right way, Saturn, what I call the karmic gatekeeper, is just above what we would call the division between the conscious subconscious mind. And look at Saturn, it's the cross over the crescent of the moon, you see? So it's the soul trap, and a lot of people mention this. In fact, here's a little trivia for you. It takes 29.5 days approximately, not exactly, for the moon to go around and catch back up to the sun to create a new moon every month. It takes about 29.5 years, give or take, for Saturn to go around your birth chart and catch back up to where it was. Isn't that interesting? 29.5 days, 29.5 years. And those are averages, they're not exact. But isn't that interesting? And that's why they say the Earth actually may be what we call the soul trap. And I actually think it is. And they actually say we end up trapped in this reincarnational loop for many times. And of course, no one knows how many times. Vedic astrology can actually give you a picture for when this potato is ready to come out of the oven, which means karmically you're going to get released. And you can tell by the positions of the planets and the aspects and the doshas that you've completed in this lifetime. There's a lot of theories on that one. And many people, have different opinions. I get comments all the time from people. Well, you're delusional. You think K2 is the past life and Rahu's deluding you. That's a lot of arrogance, because what I find is the more you study astrology, the more you'll find there is no two charts alike, and nobody knows everything. I think it's only God and the angels that can fully figure it out. But we get a lot of clues from astrology, and this takes a lot of testing. The ancient documents are very murky on some of these subjects. I know I have tons of documents. Some say one thing, some say the other. So astrologers have to be careful, because they'll go read something and that becomes their reality structure. And then I've seen other charts that totally negate what I just read. And then I'll read another book that may be older or newer, whatever, or another translation, right? And we'll find, wow, this is totally unique. So you got to be very, very careful what you say to people, because every single human being is a completely unique and individual soul having a physical experience. And all the lines of tension connected to that soul, which if you drew a big funnel down into your reality structure, is attached to the soul root. And boy, I'll tell you what, when anybody figures that one out completely, please let me know. But, I'm very humbly approach these subjects, but I have found through repetitive comparison and comparison a lot of ancient documents, there are many great truths in the Vedic astrologies on the karmic path of the soul. It's really, really interesting stuff. And so again, why I bring all this deep stuff up is because we're at a time of change. Neptune is the so-called subconscious mind. And I actually failed to point that out. I want to do this one more time. I'm going to show you real fast here what, if I can get this thing to share. There we go. See, you'll see this diagram right here kind of shows it, because the glyph of Neptune is in there. See, if this is the division between the so-called conscious subconscious mind, notice Neptune right here is the portal down into our reality structure. In fact, you can see here on this other diagram, which is the other one I like to use a lot, it actually shows that, this one right here, you can see, what does it say here? The psychic connectivity to the lower self. Now that's pretty small on the screen, but you can see if you zoom in on it. See, and that connects to the lower conscious perception of reality. So the mind is a deep, deep thing. It's interesting. Years ago, I got to meet Dr. John Mack, and I was listening to the telepathy tapes. And the lady on the telepathy tape, she was mentioning she met Dr. John Mack. And if anybody doesn't know who he was a psychiatrist. I actually sat with him up in the hills in Malibu about 25 years ago. Very intelligent man. And, psychiatrists study the mind, right? Which is all about, how do we react to things? And he was a real central figure in examining whether people who've claimed they've been abducted, right, by UFOs or extraterrestrials and tested and all this stuff, were they delusional or were they telling the truth? Well, his opinion was they were telling the truth. And he had used a bunch of different psychiatric models to determine whether they were delusional or rooted in what they believed was true. And we got into some interesting conversations. And I have to tell you, when we examine our minds, it is probably one of the most, I think, important areas for us to pay attention to. Many people talk about common sense, which is that kind of center equilibrium point that we all have in our reality structures. You see, that's very, very important, because we all have our perception of reality, but we all have common realities, right? We all see the sunrise every day. We all got to pay the bills. We all got to deal with our lives, take care of our bodies, eat, sleep, right? All that stuff, wash the clothes, and all the perfunctory duties of daily life. Well, here's what's interesting. Saturn and Neptune, and that's why I bring all this up, is going to conjoin this month. And it's very likely to bleed in a whole new perception of reality from that point forward. See, a lot of people say, well, is the world going to end on that? Well, I don't think it will. I really don't, even though I hear psychics and astrologers predicting California is going to, crash into the ocean. I wouldn't mind a little shaker to bring the real estate prices down, even though it's dangerous. But something's got to lower the real estate prices in California, right? So, and the prices of everything else. We won't get into that one. But the bottom line is, we're likely to find that this is a marker in humanity that now changes life going forward. You see, look at COVID. We know there's a lot of very big questions around COVID, so I don't want to get into that one. But can we all say, didn't life change since COVID forward? The internet exploded. Everybody and his brother's now ordering on Amazon or some other online thing, right? So life has really changed from that point forward. That's more what I would expect with the Saturn-Neptune, is that we're going to see reality structures really begin to change for everybody in their own respective unique way. And I think collectively to the world, it's going to bring a big change. I think we're also going to see the old iron-fisted structures begin to decay. And that, in some ways, may place America with its Constitution, its Bill of Rights, and all of that stuff, become a more possibly accepted way on a global scale. This whole thing with Iran, they're finding out that the Ayatollah might have killed many more thousands of people than they say. And it was brutal. They just gunned them down, cutting off hands, maiming eyes out, just brutal treatment of these people. And, Iran, this regime's been in play for 47 years. I remember when, the peanut farmer, also known as Mr. Carter, was in office as the president. And that whole thing with the Ayatollah and the Shah of Iran and everything, went on back in the 70s. And I really think some of these iron-fisted, communistic ways may be what we see shift here as we come up, So we'll see what happens. I could tell you that whole thing with Iran is going to be pretty powerful. So anyways, yeah, someone's mentioning here about alchemy. Another person's mentioning about secondary progressions. And I'm glad somebody brought that up. That was Morgan. Somebody had brought that up. Secondary progression. The Earth is a time machine. Every day when a child is born, we're going to see sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight, which is what we call our time of a day, right? And of course, a year's the cycle of the Earth around the sun. And a lunation, which is a month for a moon. The calendar is based on that, right? So here's what's interesting about that. Secondary progressions, since somebody brought that up, are really fascinating because each day of life equals a year. And when you get into what we call secondaries, primaries, and tertiary progressions, these are advanced techniques that allow you to advance any person's birth chart. You can do this with a country. You can also do this with, anything that's alive or that's been built in the physical world. You can be in a house if you want, or a city or a country, right? And you advance the chart using these various mathematical techniques, 1 degree per year. It equals a year. Those are called the solar arcs. And then secondaries look at every single planet. Like if you're somebody out there listening is 40 years old or 42 years old, a secondary progression chart will show where every single planet was 42 days after you were born. And let me tell you, it's amazing. It is a time machine. And astrology, I always joke around, it's like an H.G. Wells time machine. You can go forward and backwards with it and look at cycles in your life. It's absolutely fascinating. And the solar arcs, which is advancing every single planet 1 degree per year. And then there's also very advanced primary directions, which actually takes the ecliptical latitude you were born at and advances all the planets at that rate of what they would advance per day in that chart. So deep stuff. And thank God we got the tools today to do this with astrology programs. And you can really see timing events. Like in my life, I've gone back and just went, wow, that's exactly when this happened. That's exactly when that happened, for good or for ill in our perception of reality. So it's really fascinating stuff. And belief is not required. Again, I was a skeptic of astrology. And when my mother started showing me certain things that had happened in my life, throughout my life up to that point, I was like kind of dropping my jaw. I'm like, wow, So that's why I actually spend 30 to 40 minutes before I jump online with a client, mapping out pages of stuff that allow me to communicate to that person during a reading. And what's so cool about, again, Zoom today, you get to record it. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, somebody would walk out of my office with a whirring cassette tape, remember those, and a pile of papers. Today, you watch a video on a big screen TV and you get a booklet, you see it. So it's really a fascinating time for astrology. And, you know, I would predict too that in the future, we're going to see people integrate the celestial motions more into their life and become aware of that. And that might be part of what the Saturn-Neptune does. It brings a more spiritual awareness to our interaction to this universe, which is kind of a cool thing, because Neptune also rules creative elements of the mind. It's deep subconscious stuff. So anyways, a lot of people are making comments here, and a lot of good comments. And a lot of people are saying, you know, things that are everybody's opinion, which is great. Yes, someone's saying my chart ruler Uranus is finally direct. Yeah. Well, it's interesting how Vedic astrologers, and because that person's mentioning my chart ruler, modern astrologers make Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto rule Uranus for Aquarius, Neptune for Pisces, and Pluto for Scorpio. Ancient astrologers, including the Vedic, they don't do that. They have all the planets ruling 2 signs except for the sun and the moon. And my personal opinion is that is accurate. Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto don't rule anything, but they're very powerful in their placements and aspects in your birth chart. And they're very powerful in the sky. So, you know, again, you're going to talk to 100 astrologers, you get 100 different opinions. I always say getting astrologers to agree on something is like herding cats, you know, very, very much independence on that one. And I respect that. That's fine. Everybody has their ability to, you know, determine things the way they want. But yeah, Uranus, I actually really like that planet. You know, as much disruption as Uranus can bring, it's also a planet of geniusness. It's the 2 crescents of the moon bent outwards with the cross in the middle over the sun. And I find Uranus brings flashes of unusual intuition. In fact, no astronomer drawing breath, an astrophysicist that I've talked to, can explain Uranus orbits almost 180 degrees on its side compared to all the other planets in the solar system. You know, our planet is about 27 degrees. So they're all at different angularities, but Uranus is 180 degrees on its side. It's like, you know, totally unusual. And that's the way Uranus acts. It breaks up the reality structures that were concretized in society and brings in new. You know, and sometimes it does it violently, sometimes it does it through technology. And look at the revolutions we're seeing right now. I mean, I'm talking to people on ChatGPT right now who are basically saying, it's my friend, right? It's my best friend. It tells me what to do. You know, that's a dangerous thing in my opinion. I don't want to tell anybody what to do. But, you know, we're waltzing into a whole new reality structure. That's the combination of Uranus stirring up to the Pleiades plus the Saturn-Neptune. So with that, I'm going to run here. A lot of great comments. And I really, someone say, yeah, sometimes growth comes only out of chaos. Well, I agree with that statement. Somebody's just made that. Chippanicity, I think it is. And that's true. Growth, a lot of times, you know, I always say consciousness sometimes grows funeral by funeral and incarnation by incarnation. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. And a lot of comments here, a lot of great comments. So I have to run. I cannot stay too long today. Again, I've got stuff to go through. I say that every time, then I stay another half an hour. But this time I really have to go. And I really appreciate all of your comments. And we'll speak to you soon. And I had a lot of good comments that people have brought in. And Ella and I are doing like kind of daily questions where I respond in real brief. You only got a minute. But I try and do my best to respond, in my opinion, as to what some of those questions are. We'll try and address as many as we can over time. So, but it's always fun for you to send in your comments, and I really appreciate it because it gives me stuff to go on. That's why I like these lives. You know, I want to keep the lives going because it often is very stimulating to see all your comments coming through. And yeah, a lot of people saying here about AI. So yeah. And if anybody tunes in, quite frankly, check it out because I like him a lot. He's cool, and we'll have a good time later today with that. I think I go on at 4:00 Pacific time, and we'll take it from there. So, all right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining me. And yeah, a lot of great analogies here. A snake cannot grow unless it sheds its skin. That's very, very true. It's just like, again, the caterpillar, which turns into a butterfly, which I think is a good analogy for the soul. And, you know, that's the thing to do is not go into this Saturn-Neptune thing with fear, but more conscious awareness so that we can capitalize and reevaluate our reality structures. It could be a great time to do that. Again, we're all here to grow, and whether we think we aren't at certain times, the hard times often is what makes us grow, and it really does when you look back especially. So thanks so much, everybody, for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.